horror aficionados, and welcome back to another episode of Curse Review. Today we're delving into the 80s and dissecting the 1986 movie Critters, and why it stands out as a perfect embodiment of the B-horror movie genre. It's not just about the fur and fangs, it's about that unmistakable 80s tone. So grab your Walkman and let's journey back to the era of big hair, synth music, and creature features with Critters. Critters' story is relatively simple, but at the same time has a creative hook that was unique to the creature features of the 80s. Instead of the unsung king of that type of movie, Gremlins, Critters makes the claim that its titular characters, known as the Krites, as fugitives on the run from an intergalactic space force. They hijack a ship and take off towards a little planet named Earth. And then some bounty hunters follow suit and hijinks ensue. It's a cool idea that feels like it would be right at home in an episode of The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, and it plays a lot like that episode in particular where Kang and Kodos take over Bill Clinton and Bob Dole.
Abortions for some, miniature American flags for others. Yay!
That madcap energy is riveting, and while the movie clocks in at about 85 minutes, it does take a little while to get going. We're introduced to Brad Brown and his family, and there's about a 45-minute chunk where they cut between the idyllic Midwestern family and the aliens on the loose and the bounty hunters chasing after them. I'm a sucker for this brand of 80s horror, so it felt like a warm hug the entire time. For others, this might be a slower one for you. Leaning into the film's silliness is imperative to how much you will enjoy it. It channels that 80s vibe flawlessly, from the fashion to the hairstyles, immersing us in a world that is super retro. The movie takes us back to a time where horror was unapologetically fun and larger than life. But in the Critters case, they might be a little bit smaller. And the Krites are actually much less chaotic and almost more organized than the Gremlins. And while they do resemble Gobos from the video game Croc, as well as Karibos from Yu-Gi-Oh!, the almost unbelievable quality of their capabilities, as they almost always seem a little bit too well equipped to what they're doing, while also kind of being goofballs, makes everything feel just a little bit more silly and campy. And then once the movie starts to feel a little scary, they'll introduce some kind of new mechanic, such as the hilarious ability they have to shoot needles out as blow darts. And that comical nature of this movie is why it works so well. It's not incredibly self-serious, and it was a great choice for it to be so winking in its tone. When you see Brad's father's bowling team shirt, you'll notice a Ghostbusters reference, and as soon as I saw that, I knew exactly what director Stephen Herek and his crew were trying to accomplish here. This is back when horror could have less of an angle and just be a movie. It didn't have to be conscious or elevated. It was still a burgeoning and growing genre, and camp could actually get the kind of support that it deserves today. We just don't get horror like this anymore. Johnny Steele plays over the airwaves. Power of the night, streets are calling, stealing from the light. Further emphasizes the time period and feeling the creators are going for. It's hilarious to think that aliens could be walking among us as hair metal artists, lying in wait with cannons and artillery that are far beyond our comprehension. And I really like how smart the Krites feel too. My favorite scene is when Brad and his family have been chased up their steps after being locked out of their house, finally able to get back in, and we see two of the Krites having a conversation outside and discussing that the humans have weapons. Then a shotgun peeks out of the front door and blasts one of the Krites to smithereens. It felt like a precursor to another iconic movie of the late 80s, Child's Play, and you can really see Chucky kind of peeking through what the darker sense of humor that Herek had when making this movie. And I have to imagine that the team behind Child's Play got a lot of inspiration from Critters. While overall the acting in this movie isn't great, Scott Grimes as the son Brad, and he really pulls off that scrappy but likable kid hero, which is akin to Corey Feldman in Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. The performance isn't overly nuanced, but he does nail that wholesome quality that they're really trying to establish and kind of almost satirize during the beginning sections of the movie. It also really helps you root for the family, even when the Krites don't feel like an overly threatening menace to them. I also enjoyed the actor who played Harv the Sheriff, M. Emmett Walsh, who if you look him up, you're bound to have seen him in something. This character actor has been in everything. everything. He is so recognizable, and he plays a similarly kind of slimy, swampy kind of guy here, and to great effect. Also, Billy Zane shows up and does Billy Zane things, and I only mention that because Billy Zane went on to voice Ansem from Kingdom Hearts, and Kingdom Hearts fucks. Well, in Critters, Billy Zane actually gets fucked up, but...
Every light must fade. Every heart return to dark.
The synth soundtrack, a quintessential element of 80s horror, and Critters is no exception to that. The pulsating, synthesizer-driven score by David Newman is a nostalgic trip down memory lane. It instantly transports us to an era where these electronic sounds defined the horror genre. Of Critters, in his original review, Roger Ebert wrote, "If perfect fools can hold driver's license, why can't creatures from outer space be just as dumb? And if they are bounty hunters, why shouldn't they be trigger happy, firing at everything that moves, like a television set, for example?" We always assume that visitors from other worlds will be far more intelligent than we are, but maybe they'll just turn out to have faster means of intergalactic travel. This perfectly encapsulates what Critters sets out to do. Herrick and co. wanted aliens to be made out to be just as bumbling and clueless as humans. So much of our time, even in 2023, is spent gazing up at the heavens and wondering what kind of magnificent life is out there. While recent news has enlightened us that the American government has been aware of alien life forms for quite some time, and honestly, not to be one of those guys, but like, duh. I mean, if you believe in evolution and you see how these things work, there is bound to be life out there that is more intelligent, or at least as intelligent as us. And to be honest, the aliens that we do idolize and fantasize are more likely to be like us than not. Polluters, miscreants, and idiots who happen to fall into happy accidents. We mold ourselves into images and recreations of the art that is placed in front of us by screens. And in a way, Critters is a statement on not just humanity's obsession with the alien, but art as well. Critters doesn't aim to be an art film. It doesn't aim to be hoity-toity and overly smart. It just is. It's just fun. It's a decent movie that just so happens to be similar to other movies out there, and its similarity to these other movies of its time, and sets out to make fun of itself. Artists do tend to eat themselves. If you read enough Stephen King and then you go to write your first novel, chances are you're gonna write a book about a town that's called Barry, where there's a psychotic clown living in the sewers, but you may have some other creative spin on it. You may have some way to turn that into something new. And maybe you provide a new angle on a tried and true formula. And the world is all the better because you put yourself out there and you tried. And at that idea, Critters excels at in spades. It's an amalgamation of many parts. It has constant visual references to many important movies, such as the aforementioned Ghostbusters, E.T. It's an enormous, almost satirical homage to Steven Spielberg movies of the time. And it wears that Spielberg influence loud and proud. And the sci-fi element a la Terminator is evident as well. Instead of the aliens taking down humanity, it's alien versus alien. A novel idea more so back in 1986 than it would be now with all the team-up movies that we would get in the 2000s. Style goes a long way in making movies, and it's that element at the end of the day that makes Critters such a special movie. The creature design, the bounty hunters, the quaint set design, and the classic setup for a sequel ending create a movie that may not be perfect, but it does make for a perfect fall movie night in with a bowl of popcorn nestled up with your favorite little furry friend. Critters refuse to be pigeonholed into one thing. It has so many things worth being appreciated. And for those of you who are huge Gremlins fans, or like me, huge Gremlins 2 fans especially, Critters is definitely gonna tickle the void that's been left from not having enough Joe Dante in your life. In conclusion, Critters captures the quintessential 80s horror tone through its vibrant aesthetic, synth-heavy music, a perfect blend of horror and humor, and a small-town setting. It's a cinematic time capsule that takes us back to a time of both spookiness and style. If you enjoyed this nostalgic trip down horror movie memory lane, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And also share your favorite 80s horror movie in the comments below. Until next time, stay scared, my friends, and peace.
Hey, fucker! I'm right here! How are you gonna cover the competition when you haven't even talked about my movie?
Sheesh, I can't talk about what I want on my YouTube channel? Get a load of this, Mogwai.
Real funny, Mr. Curtis Review. Get a life, buddy, and I better not hear a mention of the C word.
Critter.
Okay, I'm not gonna tell you again.
Critters is a good movie.
Okay, now you're really testing me.
Crit.
Stop there or you'll regret it!
Tur.